Hello and welcome to the Three Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. My name is Philip Schiavone. I work for the Coalition for Christian Outreach, campus ministry where we're transforming college students to transform the world. And with me today, from Hearts and Minds Bookstore in Dallastown, Pennsylvania, the host with the most about the books that you should be reading, Byron Borger. Byron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Phil. Right here in Dallastown, PA, our little store. I'm sitting in the corner of our bookstore and recording live. It's fun to be with you today. Thanks.
Yeah, pleasure's mine. And we are recording this towards the tail end of the Olympics. And I've got a couple athletic accolades under my own belt and a fun proximity to the Olympics story to share. Do you have anything close to the Olympics to your heart?
Oh man, we are Olympic crazy, watching it late at night and all that stuff. We have a relative who's got some connections to the rowing team. Our friend who works for the CCO, Will, up at Penn State, helps coach some of the wrestlers. So I feel like a kind of adjacent, although I don't know anybody this year that's actually in them, by name. How about you? You got a story?
Yeah, I've got a couple different Olympic stories, but the one I'll share here is, and you might remember this, one of my outreaches on Shippensburg's campus was to the ping pong club.
That's
We
right.
actually formed the ping pong club, and it became an intercollegiate team, even, which was really fun. But one of the times I took them to a club in Carlisle. I took the whole squadron of these 20-year-olds, right, to this club, and the Jamaican alternate to the 1996 Olympic team was there playing ping pong, and I scored some points against an Olympian in ping pong. Now I lost,
That is awesome. What a story.
but
Campus
I
ministry
actually
at its best. You started the ping pong club that gave you an in to reach out to those guys. You took them over to Carlisle and met an Olympian, and you
went to an
played
Olympian,
against him or her.
played against them, and even took a few points. It's
Amazing.
embarrassing how little, but I mean, I can at least say I scored a point against an Olympic table tennis player from
That is
Jamaica. And
amazing. When we've watched that on TV, it is amazing. They go back and forth so fast. It's in beach volleyball and stuff. The ball goes up in the air, and then you wait. I mean, man, in ping pong, it is unbelievable.
the most fascinating thing this world could ever do would just be to put normal average Joes out there in the Olympics some year and just have them compete, because we would just see even more how amazing these
Yeah.
athletes are. And it's great, it's entertaining, but there's also lots of information out there about the Olympics and about sports. And I think today you've got some books to share for us on the topic itself.
Well, yeah, I just thought because we're enjoying sports and the whole culture is following it, except a couple of Christians that got mad early on, but most people are like really enjoying watching the athletic prowess and the skill and the competition. And as it goes, we're kind of a pretty sports crazy culture anyway. So I thought I'd just name three books. There's tons we could talk about, and I'm only allowed to talk about three. But there's that classic book Stanley Hauerwas, the theologian, had the foreword to it called The Faith of 50 Million, which is about baseball. Speaking of baseball, there's that Joe Posnanski, who's a great, great sports writer. He has one called The Baseball 100, which is the top 100 moments in baseball. I love that. And we've sold a number of those. There's a great book by a son of a guy that I went to college with, a guy named Mark Altrogi, was my classmate at Indiana, PA, but his son grew up, became a pastor, but he wrote a book called Game Day for the Glory of God, which is just a nice way to say it. So there's all kind of books out there about sports, about athletics, about a Christian perspective, touchdowns for Jesus, a woman theologian wrote. So I could go on, but I'm going to highlight just three today. And the first one is not even exactly about sports, but it's an adjacent kind of topic. Sociologists study this a lot. You can major in it at some universities, and it's called leisure. Leisure. So the first book I want to mention is called Leisure and Spirituality. The subtitle is Biblical, Historical, and Contemporary Perspectives. It's by a guy named Paul Hentzman, Heintzman. It's on Baker Academic. It's been out a couple of years. It is by far the best and really only serious academic study offering Christian scholarship on the field of leisure studies. So, of course, when you're talking about leisure, you're talking about recreation. You're talking about, sort of, in a certain sense, the opposite of work. The Greeks had a big deal in Western culture about leisure. Of course, the Olympics are rooted in the Olympic experience in ancient Greece. But how did the Greek pagan thinkers, even like Plato and those guys, think about the leisure life? A great Catholic writer, Joseph Piper, has a book called Leisure, the Foundation of Culture. Now, for him, leisure means sort of relaxing and being intellectual. There's also almost a dualism between body and soul and spirit, and that the higher thing is to reflect. This Christian thinker does not want to buy into that dualism. He does not want to say that the body is somehow underneath contemplation and that leisure is primarily contemplation and resting and thinking. Rather, leisure is actually something you often do with your body. It's rooted to play. We talk about the word recreation. Recreation is recreation. So there's a section in here on Sabbath, what it means to rest, what it means to play, what it means to be playful, what it means to have a playful sort of side, even in the way in which you work. So is leisure have to be opposition to work? Not exactly. Is rest and work and labor and Sabbath opposites? Not exactly. So this big, thick book studies both the meaning of the word, the history of how it's used, going back in ancient philosophy, biblical surveys, and biblical examples into a contemporary modern Christian philosophy of leisure studies. Biblical, historical, and contemporary perspectives. There is nothing like it in print for those that are into recreation, for those that are into outdoor education, for those that are into wilderness camping and those types of hiking, as well as sports fans. Anybody that's serious, deeply serious about this, it's considered like by Leland Ryken, who had put an essay collection together back 50 years ago on some of this stuff he used to teach at Wheaton, says that one of the most notable features of the book is its thoroughness. All of the topics of contemporary interest are covered, and the survey of scholarship is breathtaking. So when a scholar like Leland Ryken from Wheaton says that the scholarship is breathtaking, that's an important academic work. So those of you that are working with academic majors in leisure studies, this is a must. But for anybody that likes to think about the playful life, it's a good foundational book. It's a little rigorous, it's a little academic, but I wanted to start there just so we get that leisure studies book out in the open. It ought to be better known than it is, and we're really proud to have it here. It's a good, good book. Now I'm going to go the complete opposite way, and rather than have a big, heavy, thick philosophical book about leisure, I'm going to dive right into the question of sports, and it's the shortest one we have, and I think it's one of the best. This is a book called Sports, Faith, and Life. It's by Brian Bolt. Bolt is a coach, and he teaches kinesthetics, body and exercise and stuff, at Calvin University in Grand Rapids. I'll just tell you one funny thing about this little book. You might notice, for those that at least are looking online, if you're listening, you can't see this, but you see this little logo on the corner of the book. It's called Calvin Shorts. What this series does is it takes college professors at Calvin University, published by Calvin College Press, and they ask them to do a short essay on the kind of work that they do. Many of these scholars there in various fields, there's probably a dozen of these Calvin Shorts, have written books that are like the leisure study book, big and thick and heavy. But they said, just give us a pop level, ordinary book for ordinary people that want to dive into a topic with scholarly rigor, but short and sweet. And so this is one of the Calvin Shorts. And on the little logo here, you see John Calvin wearing short pants, which I think is just hilarious. So you got Calvin in shorts. They are short studies, all by Calvin profs. There's about a dozen of these books, and this is the one on athletics. There's one on housing. There's one on urban studies. There's one on American history. There's a great one on disability studies. There's one on immigration issues. So there's a whole bunch of these different Calvin Shorts. This is one of my favorites. And it is about athletics. It's about sports, about faith, about life. There's questions about sports for athletes that play. Competition, is that a good thing? Whatever. How do you and can you grow as a Christian as you're an athlete? What does it mean to integrate sports or a Christian perspective with your athletics and the way you play to the glory of God? But it's also for anybody that's just interested in athletics, as a fan, as a follower, maybe as a parent, helping your kid in the sports teams. There's virtues and vices in athletics that show up particularly, maybe less so at the Olympics because everybody's so chummy, and it's such an honor to be there. But when you get into, Sunday afternoon football, man, or some serious basketball thing, there's some real tension on hockey, of course. And so he addresses some of the virtues and the vices that come with professional sports or playful sports. So I love this book. It's something we almost all of us do, and he makes the case that it's a good thing. Um, I love in the very beginning of the book, he talks about how they were on a mission trip with a group of young adults from their college in Africa, and they didn't know the language of the local people, and the people didn't know English very well and were afraid to speak in English. And so everybody was there, and it was super awkward. And somebody got a soccer ball out, and he describes in about a page of beautiful prose what it felt like to very tentatively start kicking this soccer ball around. And then they realized they could get a little serious. And these African kids were pretty good, and they were kicking the ball even more. And pretty soon it got pretty aggressive. And then their fists got clenched, the way athletes do, as they gave it their all. And they realized that the sort of teams were being formed and alliances and hugs. What a beautiful story of what athletics can do to even bring people together and it sounded like a Pepsi commercial or something, the first page. So he's a good writer. It's fun prose. It's good for anybody, parents, young adults, anybody working with athletes or who enjoys sports. This is our beginning level book, and it is as thoughtful as can be by a coach from Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that's one that I highly, highly recommend.
Thanks, Byron. One thing I'll interject here is what I love about these books is I know in my own faith and in my own journey as a teenager into a college student, and even right afterwards when I joined the CCO, I really had to wrestle with what was the difference between it just being allowed in my faith to enjoy sports versus integrated to my faith. Right. And it actually was, it's still something I grapple with a little bit to this day. As much as I enjoy sports and competition, I made a short list just the other day on vacation last week. I made a short list of things that bring me life. And I hesitated putting competition and play down because I still have this like slight internal struggle of, is it okay? Is it faithful? Is it Christian? Is it godly to enjoy competition and enjoy play? And what I love is we've got scholars, we've got theologians, we've got these people that have really well thought this out and have been backed by their universities and colleges and seminaries to say, yes, there's a way to integrate this delightfully and faithfully to your life. So I'll just interject there. I've got tons of stories from my own life and in my ministry about that. And it's even one of the reasons why I joined the CCO was making sense of this very question around sports, recreation, and faith was not only permitted, but allowed, endorsed, and promoted to be interacted with college students as well. So this is right down my alley, and I'm super encouraged by this, Byron.
When we in the CCO had that Jubilee conference that some of our listeners will be familiar with, in the fall, we invite students to come to this event and they tell the story throughout the main stage talks of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. We start with the doctrine of creation, that our bodies are good and the stuff we do on this earth gives God pleasure. So he himself enjoys humans doing human things. And, right out of the gate, Adam and Eve named the animals. There's some playfulness with language. There's some storytelling going on. Adam writes a poem, Bone of My Bone, the first love sonnet. And so there's some aesthetic pleasure happening right there out of the gate in the Garden of Eden. And that very naturally is a hop, skip, and a jump to playfulness, to creativity, to aesthetics, which is not that far from athletics. And pretty soon you're talking about enjoying play with your body. One of the problems almost all these books name is that in our hyper athletic culture, we've sort of lost a sense of playfulness when we play. The competition piece to win, and it's become so mechanized. We see that in the Olympics. People can beat world class records with the right kind of training, which is almost like a machine. The body's like a machine. Well, that's not a typical way most of us play, and it's probably not quite normative for most of us to view our bodies a machine and win at all cost and break the record as if that's what you live for. Most of us play just like we paint. I mean, we're kind of sloppy at it and we just enjoy it, but we use our bodies to glorify God. The incarnation of Jesus into the world and his resurrection in the body reminds us that the stuff we do in our bodies matter. So each of these books talk about the distinctively Christian way we can approach these things, like athletics, just as we would politics or science or business or art. Anything can be integrated naturally into the warp and woof of the way we think about these very things. So sorry to preach, but that's what these books do. And they do it with this topic of play. Decades ago, Phil, we were opening our bookstore in the 1980s, and we were wanting to have books on every topic. And we had a little sports section, and there were books on kind of how athletes can, have virtue and know God better by being decent and strong and, train your body and stuff. And they were okay. But there was nothing very serious analyzing through a Christian lens topics like competition. Can you be gentle and meek the way the gospel calls us to be, and yet be a winner on the field wanting to compete in playful ways? And a guy who worked in a campus ministry, not the CCO, but another organization that worked with athletes, decided he was going to write a book on competition and analyze the way our culture has almost made that into an idol. And his leaders at that organization told him not to write it because they said, we want to train our athletes to win, because particularly in those days, 40 years ago, if you were a winner, you would get to speak at halftime and you could give your testimony about Jesus, but only if you were a winner. So the gospel was at stake, and they wanted their team members to win at all costs. And they said, don't get them upset about competition and thinking maybe you got to muffle that a little bit. And they literally tried to get him not to write that book. And he sent the manuscript to me back in those days. An amazing work. Eventually came out, and he lost his job over it. There were people that just said, you can't even think about this Christianly with any kind of radical critique of the typical way the world thinks about it. So now we come full circle, and we want to celebrate these things, but there's some people that paid a price to write these kind of books, and we're glad for them that there's so many now. Send us an email if you want, and we'll give you some lists of others. Let me close with one more, though, and this is a sports book of sorts, but it's also a book about play. It is a book about recreation, and I've told you about it before. I think I've maybe even done it already in our podcast here, but if I'm going to list 3 books from Hearts and Minds on sports, besides the leisure one and this little one by Bolt, I want to tell you again about a year of playing catch by my good friend, Ethan Bryan. Ethan is a dear friend, used to be a youth pastor, got interested in sports as a young man, and he played baseball. He loved baseball. For whatever reason, his coaches talked him out of playing baseball when he went to college, and he became a golfer. And he played golf for a while. But he discovered sort of his first love, if you will, and as a young parent began to play catch with his daughters. He's written a novel. He's written a memoir about going to baseball stadiums. It's kind of fun. I'm even mentioned in it, oddly. He's written a couple of different essays and really good stuff. He's a good writer. But this is his breakout book on Zondervan. It became popular and well known, and it is literally him playing catch every day for a year. He starts with his own daughter on January 1st, has a game of catch, talks and writes about what it meant to them. It's a beautiful chapter. And they say, oh, let's do this again. Well, let's just do it again. And pretty soon he realized he's going to do this every single day for 365 days. So as he's setting up his agenda, he's traveling around the country to try to play with famous people. He's trying to get on Oprah, which doesn't work out, but he almost did. He tries to play in the White House with the president. That almost worked out, but it didn't. He wanted to come to Jubilee. He wanted to come to Hearts and Minds. That did not work out, thank goodness, because we didn't want balls flying around in here. But he ends up playing with some pretty famous athletes. He plays in the parking lot out front of stadiums. He goes to the Field of Dreams place where they shot the great movie and played catch with the writer of the novel, Field of Dreams, which, as you may recall, has some really tender moments recalling their fathers and games of catch they played as boys. Oh, this chapter when he goes to the Field of Dreams, which is actually out in the middle of the Midwest, is a tearjerker, and it's a great chapter. So Ethan plays catch for 365 days and ruminates in every chapter about the difference that it makes in his life. One of the things he discovers, he's writing a more serious theological book on this now. I'm hoping, I think he's been working on this, is this understanding of the role of play. That sports is a beautiful thing, but play is at the heart of it. Not just winning and competition and success and teamwork, all good virtues, I guess, but this playfulness, which he links to God's own overflowing goodness in the love of the Trinity. So he's done some deep thinking about the triune theology of the dance of God as the Trinity loves one another and it flows over in great abundance to make the world. And so out of this great love comes a world that's so loaded with love that all we can do is rejoice and worship and play. He's not against work. He's not against seriousness. He's got a broken heart like all of us about the sadnesses of the world and the injustices. He's done some stuff with African American baseball and the African American Sports Announcers League. He's lectured up at Cooperstown, New York, where they do a serious lecture series every year. So he knows his stuff, and he's a great activist around peace and justice issues. I love this guy. But at the heart of this book is just a story, and it's a story of care and of love and of grace and of playfulness. It's a simple daily experiment in what it taught me about life by Ethan Bryan, A Year of Playing Catch. It's a great book, and I'm happy to tell people about it. Hope some people order it, whether you're a baseball fan or not, although he's a big baseball fan. Whether you're a baseball fan or not, playing together is at the heart of something good about God and why we live the way we do. I think we in the CCO love this book. I think others would as well. And so I wanted to commend it to you now. So that's my third one in the 3 books.
Thanks so much, Byron. And obviously, I'm a big baseball fan, and I'm ashamed that I haven't read that one yet. I have it. I did
You do
order it
have
from you already. I do need to read it. This just pushes it up the list all the more, and I hope it does for you, the listener, as well. And I think the part of doing it daily, right? I think anything done well needs to be done daily in a certain sense, right? And anything that you put your hand, your mind, your heart to in that sort of sense, you're just gonna bump into some gems no matter what. And so to have a book where he's doing that through playing catch and time with his daughters, and then transforms to time with athletes and things like that, you're gonna you're gonna bump into God
yeah,
in the
yeah.
corners of doing something, the same thing every day, daily, and really big and unexpected ways. So I'm even more curious now that you've pitched that book to me again and to our listeners for the first time here. So I really appreciate that, Byron.
Well, I've said this before to you, Phil, as well, but one of the little pieces of this book is somehow about a year into it. It's a couple of years old now. A couple of years ago, ESPN got a hold of it and did a documentary feature. I think it was on Father's Day. And so there was this feature about the book and then pictures of people playing catch. It was really nice, and sports fans liked it. Well, that got the book sold a little bit more. And then one day, a couple of years a year later, Ethan noticed an obituary in the paper of a young man with the exact same name he had, Ethan Bryan. And Ethan Bryan was killed in a car wreck coming back from baseball practice. He had his glove in his car. The story was told that the father, I guess, went back in to get the kid's glove. Just a sad story. And Ethan thought, I wonder if I should send him my book. It's the same name. I got the same name. That's just so weird that Ethan Bryan died. But he didn't want to be pushy. And he waited and he prayed and he thought, maybe I should. I should just give the guy the book. And he did. And he reached out and became a very good friend with the father. And the father decided to play a game of catch in honor of his deceased son. That got on ESPN and became went viral. And pretty soon people started doing this. And now it's almost like a thing. There's been several sports videos and documentaries about it. People are doing it as a fundraiser, playing catch like for a month, or in the name of a deceased person or somebody they loved who was once a great sports fan. And so it's become almost like a movement now. And this book has sort of generated a playfulness where people have good conversations about deep things that matter while they're having fun playing catch. Whether you're good at it or not, he buys gloves for people that don't have gloves. He has a little fundraising thing where some of the proceeds of the book goes to buying baseball gloves for the disadvantaged. So he's really started kind of a movement here, and that makes the book that much more fun to tell about too. It's really a kind of creative things that you never expect when you're writing a book that are going to actually come out and begin to take hold. So I do think it's a good book, and you could Google some stuff on it and watch it online if you're that kind of person who likes to do that sort of thing and see Ethan live playing catch. It's really fun.
It's amazing. There's always unity in the spirit of God, right? And so when there's these opportunities to show compassion and unite with somebody else in their suffering, but also in the things that they're celebrating, the things that they're gifted with, why not? Why not read up on how we can unite with God and unite with others through sports, through the thinking of our faith, but then the playfulness within our own bodies and the joy that brings so many of us, right? I mean, I'm definitely a huge sports fan, and I've got board games stacked behind me. I love competing, right? This is near and dear to my heart, but I also know that there's just so much. There's so much, so many people out there that are interested in so many different aspects of sports. But then it's like, yeah, I'm a Christian and I play this sport, or I'm a Christian and I enjoy this thing. And sometimes you can almost sense the distance that that sport or that recreation has. Why not unite it? Why not put your mind to it a little bit and then see that there's room for sports, there's room for recreation, not only in ourselves, but in the communities that we're building around us and being intentional about too. So, yeah, anything else, Byron, before I close this out?
Happy to talk about these, and we hope we get some orders and stay in touch. It's a delight to talk about books with folks. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Byron. And yes, if you want to order these books, the first link in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast version, the first thing in the description below will be a link for the order form. We'll have details to the different books that Byron talked about. You can contact Byron and I as well in the description below. We would love it if you subscribed and followed the show as well as liked the show and left a review. That helps us get these episodes out to more and more people so that they too can enrich their hearts and minds with not only books about sports, but the other various topics we've talked about through the episodes. And of course, read these books. We want you to read the books, and we would love your feedback on them. That just helps us grow the audience, not just for Byron or anything like that, but for these authors that put such great work. Again, I've said this before, but when an author puts their work into a book for us, it's like we get almost a lifetime of their learning in what, a couple days of reading a book. That's such a good investment to our own souls. So read these books, let us know what you think so we can continue to share that along. And of course, listen in next time in 2 weeks for the next episode of the 3 books from Hearts and Minds podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.